Hello YouTube, this is Neon. Today I'm going to be talking about suffering. And by suffering, I mean suffering for righteousness' sake or suffering as a result of doing good. Now, this talk on suffering, it's not intended to be complete nor conclusive. It's just me touching on the topic, okay? It's just me touching on the topic of suffering. So I want to make that clear. This talk, it is not about asceticism. And by asceticism I mean choosing not to fast, or choosing to fast, choosing to either have a food fast or a sexual fast. It can be flagellation where people whip themselves, but this kind of suffering, we have control for one thing, and that's not a good thing. We don't always make the best decisions for ourselves, and I believe that the universe, or the God of our understanding, really makes the best choices on how we should suffer. Suffering for doing good purifies us. It purifies us, it shows us how to relate to people, it shows us how to understand the world, and it makes us a better person in so many respects. Not just a loving, kind, gentle, touchy-feely type of a good person, which is part of how it purifies us, but it can make us wise, it can make us confident, it can make us shrewd in our dealings with other people, and not as susceptible to being taken advantage of by other people. It purifies us in many different ways. Personally, I think the best way to suffer is to get a big dream for one's life, a holistic dream. A dream that will include money. It can be anywhere from having a few tens of thousands of dollars saved, or even perhaps a few $1,000s saved, all the way up to having several $100 million saved. But that should only be one aspect of the dream. It should be to have a moral wealth, an emotional wealth, a relational wealth, a spiritual wealth, a psychological wealth, a familial wealth. So it should be the best way to suffer for doing good is to have a big dream for one's life, to pay the price for that dream. No matter how big the dream is or how small the dream is, we have to pay a price so that our dreams come true. If it's to be a teacher, we've got to go to school for 4 years, and I think it's another year or two of teacher training. That's the price to become a teacher. And it goes up if it's to be a doctor, okay? If it's to be financially independent, it's going to be a higher price. If it's going to be to have a holistic dream like I just described, the price goes up even more, okay? Now, once I realized that I needed to give my time, talents, and as well as my money, all three, in order to really begin to get the benefits that the universe has for me, I began to seek ways in which I could help people. This guy had asked me to help him, right, put together a piece of machinery he had ordered online. It was an expensive piece of machinery, and the way he asked me, it sounded like he was going to be reading through the directions, and he was going to kind of have me help him. And in fact, once I got into his room, it was, well, there it is, it's in the box, you go ahead and put it together. So I said, first of all, this takes two people, I can't do it on my own, I'm going to need your help. So I read through the directions. I suspect he may have been somewhat illiterate, he may not have been able to read the directions. But we put it together, and it was back-breaking. He never offered me anything to drink. I spent hours, I remember sweat dripping off my face putting this machinery together. I went to my room and I brought us drinks. He complained that the drink was a diet soda. He said, I can't stand diet soda. He had drunk the entire diet soda when he looked at the can and realized, oh, this is a diet soda. I can't believe you did that to me. I normally would never drink a diet soda. I hate them. Of course, like I said, he drank the entire diet soda and didn't seem to complain until then. I let him know that there was a piece, an additional thing that needed to be purchased so that this machine wouldn't break down. A special kind of carpet that prevents the machine from building up too much static electricity and breaking down. And for some reason the manufacturers chose not to include this rug as part of their package, considering that this was maybe 10, 12 years ago. The machine had cost, I think he paid $2,500, $3,000. So I spent days putting this thing together, and eventually I just was fed up with this guy. I didn't want to help him anymore. I didn't want to be bothered with him. And I sleep during the day. Because of my mental health, I really have issues sleeping at night most of the time. I remember he woke me up one time during the day, and this guy was much bigger than me, by the way. And I just told him, you woke me up, I barely can sleep, don't you ever come knocking on my door. And he said, well, I'm sorry, and he wanted more help. And he ended up leaving me a nasty letter saying, I can't believe you talked to me like that, you're a jerk. So the machine broke down, and I couldn't believe what, I was living in Skid Row Housing Trust, which is, they at the time, those were SRO, single room occupancy type buildings that were government buildings that were in the Skid Row district of LA. And this guy's living there. He did work. He was an armed security guard. I'm glad he didn't shoot me. But for him to have spent all this money on a piece of machinery that barely even fit in his small room, our rooms were quite small. They're maybe 150 square feet. It was so ridiculous. He procrastinated on putting it together, possibly because he didn't have time or he was illiterate and couldn't figure out the directions. So when the machine broke, it was past the date where he could return it. So he just threw away $2,500. It was terrible. I learned a lot about that. I learned that, or at least I began to learn that when I volunteer to work for free for somebody, that I need to have standards. That I need to not let people try to define what I'm going to do to help them, and then it doesn't even wind up being what they said or what they suggested. I need to have standards. I learned a lot out of that experience. I certainly got frustrated and got to the point where it was like, I'm done. Once the machine broke down, it was like, I'm done. Couldn't help you even if I wanted to. And I don't want to. So I learned a lot about that. And I learned more than what I can say right now. But it was a good experience. Now, I've tithed since 1999. I began paying offerings in 2005, above the 10%. I used to give my tithes to this beautiful lady named Linda. And with her, I remember her and I disagreed on one major issue, which was corporal punishment for children. I don't believe that parents have a right to hit on their children. I believe that it is immoral to do so. But in giving her my tithes, because she kind of acted like a pastor for people, sometimes I would force her to listen to all my problems, not like physically force and hold her there, but I would call her and I would talk and she would listen, and it was like I expected her to listen, to listen to me, even when I was talking about issues that I knew she didn't agree about. I was expecting to get something back for my money. And that's not what tithing is all about. The universe, or the God of our understanding, is the one that rewards us for the giving that we do freely unto others, getting nothing back in return. And that includes bending people's ears, and that includes talking about issues with people that they don't want to talk about because they don't agree with those issues. I learned a lot about that, and I learned that I needed to stop giving directly to people because it was difficult for me to not expect something back in return. which is why I started sponsoring children in 2009, because I knew that from them I would never get anything back in return. I couldn't bend their ears. I would just get a thank you once a year or once every 6 months or something. So I learned a lot about my own evil and my own selfish intentions in giving, and that bending someone's ear and taking someone's time is a way of trying to get something back from them. That's not what giving is all about. Now, one way of suffering for doing good is giving to charity. One of the main reasons a lot of people don't give to charity, or perhaps it's an excuse for some people, or a cop-out, but for other people it is probably the main reason, and that is they don't want to get burned. They're afraid the money is going to be misspent, that the intention of the charity is not sincere, and that a lot of that money is going to go into people's pockets to help enrich their greed. And this has happened. When the PTL was found to be excuse me, very scandalous in their financial dealings, I believe that TBNs, who they were closely related to, or perhaps a part of, all of the donations after these scandals happened, with Jimmy Swaggart and all that, they went down 90%. People just stopped giving. People felt like they got burned. That's an example of suffering for doing good. The only thing is that when we stop giving, we stop receiving from the universe. So once we find out we're being burned, we need to stop giving to those agencies, and we need to learn from that experience. It means that we need to do a little more investigative work before we decide which charity we're going to give to, which means we need to be a little bit more responsible and put a little more time into who we give to once we find out that we've been burned, so we can minimize the chance of us being burned. It means that there's all of these lessons we're learning about being hardworking, taking the time to investigate, not taking things for granted when we're burned. But the lesson that we shouldn't get out of it is, well, I'm not going to give to anybody ever again. Okay? But that's an example of the suffering we go through and how it purifies us. All of those things I just said about giving, that's an example. So this is my little talk on suffering for doing good or suffering for righteousness' sake. And if you like this video, please like, subscribe, share, comment, watch a commercial, recommend my video to someone else. Do one or more of those things. Thank you. That's my chance.